Anthony, what's going on, man? Welcome to the Dad Edge, my friend.
Hi, Larry. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm excited to have you. Before we get started, I know your background is in the FBI, and we were just chatting here before we got started, and we know a mutual friend here, and that is Mr. Chris Voss.
Chris
So
Voss, yeah, great
yeah,
guy. Yeah,
he's a
great
great
guy.
guy.
You just shared with me that he actually had been on your show, so that's wonderful.
Yeah, he's come on twice, and just really fantastic.
Office negotiator, yeah, amazing.
Yeah, yeah, helps us with marriage.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
But no, it's really
that's
great to meet
funny.
you, man. What I really want to start here with is first of all, the title of your book. I know you've got a
Uh,
copy of it right there in front of you.
yeah, yeah. If you want me to, yeah. It's
Yeah.
backwards, but it's outsider agent. Outsider agent, and people ask me, well, why outsider? Because I was an outsider, and outsiders don't quite fit in. Always living in the edge and risking it all, and never playing it safe. And most people that have ever accomplished anything are outsiders because they don't just you know conform to the norm. And I think that it's important sometimes to do that in your life, to be able to like pivot and just say, hey, I'm going to do this. And just like you hit share about your son in his book, it's like there's a story there, pivot, tell the story. And just because something's not working your way, there's the reason behind it, and what you do is just find another way. So, you know,
I agree, man. And I want to start with it with your childhood. You uh
sure.
you didn't actually start here in the United States. You grew up elsewhere. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I grew up in Caracas, Venezuela. It's in the news all the time, and not for good reasons. And I came to the United States when I was 15 years old. So I was a teenager in the mid 70s, so much older than I look. And growing up in Venezuela was dangerous, to say the least. It was from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to sleep. It was just danger, danger, Will Robinson, and my parents, like any parents, created or try to create sort of a bubble, for us to function. But the moment you leave your house, your block, and, you're looking at, getting kidnapped or something would happen to you. I mean, if the spiders don't kill you, the snakes don't kill you, the freaking wasps, there's gigantic wasps don't kill you. Uh, your fellow man will, because it's just a very cloister environment where it's very dangerous. And, you can't just go into it. And you're close to the jungles in South America. So, you can't go into any random river and say, hey, I'm going to take a swim, because it could be teeming with piranhas and then you get eaten. So it's, you don't know any different because this is how you grow up. So you don't know that there is anything different. Also, I grew up in the mid 70s. So it was a time where, there was no computers or Google or phones or nothing. Your entertainment was, keeping yourself alive, not getting kidnapped. And I had the good fortune to have parents that were really, on the ball as far as protecting us. And my mom, she was like a she-wolf tigress, beautiful. I mean, when you look at the book and see the picture, you go, oh, it's a really beautiful woman. But she was tough. She was tough, uh, and she was training us to survive. And it was a school, and it was just the survival mode. So I tell a few stories, like just to give you an idea what my mom was like. She was one story that I've told many times is we were getting portraits, and in those days, not the 1800s, you get portraits, you go to a professional, he takes pictures and all that. My mom had taken the spot, and so she parked, and this woman felt that my mom had taken her spot of some Russian lady. So she walks up to my mom, and we're sitting in the back. It's my brother, my sister, and I. And she comes in and she literally hits my mom. Pow! That was like a slap or a punch in the face. And then starts walking away. And my mom sits there and she turns red like a tomato and starts spewing lava in Spanish. And so she was an Aquila. She's like a den mother, in the scouts. And so she reaches in her purse and grabs her scout knife and pulls it out. And she turns around and says, sit, don't move. So she gets out of the car and starts walking towards the lady. And the lady must have seen her. She rolls up the window, shuts the door. And then my mom just like, we're like, oh my God, what is my mom going to do? So she goes around and she punctures, pow, 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 every single tire on
No
the
way.
car. And then she just turns around and gets back in the car and she's just fuming. And then all of a sudden she just comes down. She goes, all right, let's go. So we just leave there like nothing had happened, you know. And then, of course, she's telling the story to my grandmother when we get home. You know, she's hardcore Catholic, wearing black all the time. And, you know, every 7 years somebody dies, she's wearing black. And so she gets to the part where she had the knife and she, you know, and punctures the tires. And my grandmother thinks my mom stabbed the lady. No, 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 mom, I didn't kill the woman. I mean, that was like part of how she was. I'll give you another. If I got into a fight, you know, she would want to know if I didn't win, I got hit. And you know, if I something happened to me and there wasn't any blood, my mom's like, okay, get up, you know, keep on going, you know. So she was not the cuddly type. Come here, honey, let me hold you. Never, never happened to me. Never happened. You know, I'll give you another example. Like, for example, there was a time that there was this gang that was always after us, and so my mom decided that she was going to take us to school for a while there. And my brother must have said something to one of the gang members, and I was at a distance, and then I saw some kind of commotion, and they walked away, and there were fences that on the school grounds. And so when my mom came to pick us up, she had a little Volkswagen. Uh, as we're making our way out, they block the car and then they surround the car and they're not letting it go. My mom opens the door, boom, out of nowhere, and she says, "¿Quién es el jefe? Who's the boss?" And starts pointing fingers. What do you got in your pocket? What do you got in your pocket? What do you? So she literally gets each and every one of the kids to get empty their pockets. I mean, they're teenagers, but dangerous. I mean, they'll take your heart out, show it to you before you die. I mean, they'll kill you. And then she throws them off their game. So they're off kilter. And she gets everybody to empty their pockets and says, once she identifies who the boss is, you think you can fight my son on your own? You need all these people to fight him? So she turns around, looks in the car, and I'm hoping she picks my brother because my brother is badass. And she turns around me and says to me, "You better get out here and kick his ass. If you don't, I'll kick your ass." So we had been in karate for a little bit, and I'll share that with you in a little bit. And so, yeah, I had to get out of the car and fight this kid. And my mom did that. And and it's funny because, you know, I've talked to her since, you know, she's old, really old, but she's got her mind is intact. And would you do it again? Yes, absolutely. I wouldn't do it any other way. Was I close to her? Was it like mommy? No. Do I love her? Yeah. Do I admire her? Yeah. Do as a kid, I would have said, "Mom, just back it up a little bit." But she didn't. As an adult, I realized that she was training me to survive in a really, really difficult and dangerous environment. So I grew up at a time, it was like 16 years after World War II. Okay, so that to put it in perspective. So what happened in Europe? You know, Ukraine flattened to the ground, not a building standing. Well, take that and multiply it by every country. You got people displaced. There's no places for them to work at, no places to go, and all the people moving all over the world. A lot of them end up in Venezuela and South America, Argentina, Chile. So I'm growing up with first and second generation Europeans, and my family had been there for hundreds of years. So at the time, there were a lot of these karate people moving to South America. And, you know, the Brazilian jiu-jitsu, where jiu-jitsu is from, Japan. It's not from Brazil. So a lot of these jiu-jitsu people had moved to Brazil, Venezuela, and I happened to have the good fortune this master Choco Sato had moved to Venezuela. My parents found out about it, and I didn't know much about karate. Again, you know, I grew up in the mid 70s in Venezuela, and so my mom puts us with this guy. And fast forward, my parents were bickering, and you know, like all parents that or couples that are about to get divorced, you know, there's a lot of infighting. You did this and you did that, and so one thing led to another, and my parents, my mom got into it with my brother and kicked him out, and I got caught in the crosshairs of that firefight there, and then I got kicked out too. And then that day was like the very defining day because that was it. So my dad had been living with my grandfather had an apartment at the Caracas Country Club near downtown, and my grandfather was ailing. had cancer. He didn't really know that he was that sick, but he knew what was coming in Venezuela. Socialism was really getting roots, and he knew what was coming. So it was like, okay, I got to do right by my son. And so they had been talking about moving. My dad was educated in the United States, because in those days, and even before then, a lot of the families would send their kids to Europe or the United States. My dad was sent to the U.S., went to a military academy here, one of the oldest ones, spoke English perfectly, and he loved the United States. So my grandfather, basically, I talked to my dad and said, well, why don't you guys just go? And he had asked us. So we were excited. I'm a kid. I don't know. I think it's going to be a vacation. I'm 15. But hey, one thing, can't tell your mom anything. So we don't say anything to my mom. And it was my first secret mission. And so my dad, we moved here and then landed when I was 15. And then, my journey in the US began.
Mm. Wow. I want to go back to your mom and this whole situation. And first of all, how you grew up. The thing that really, really stuck out to me was, if you weren't going to get killed by the local gangs, if you weren't going to get killed by the insects, the wasps, the snakes, or something that could eat you if you go swimming, there had to be this element constantly of survival. And you actually said the word twice, survival twice, like almost this fight or flight type of mentality where you always had to be vigilant. You always had to be on guard. And I think it's really important that we're always vigilant, but most of us here, obviously in the state, we're not used to that degree of being that aware of our surroundings. What did it feel like for you to transition from that type of environment into the United States? Was it an immediate breath of fresh air, or did it seem just as difficult in some cases? But what was that like for you?
Well, that's a really great question, Larry, because it was. I mean, the contrast was huge. So, when we land, and again, the context is the mid 70s, and I mean, I see like candy machines. Candy machines we didn't have those in Venezuela, and you got Baby Ruths and all these chocolates. And I'm a kid. I'm like, wow, and the first thing that I thought, it was like the machine wouldn't last 3 seconds. I mean, like an hour before somebody beats it and loots it. But I mean, here, everyone seemed respectful. People picked up the trash. I mean, things that most people would take for granted. I noticed all of it because it was gigantic contrast. And just being at the hotel and getting ice from an ice machine. And I remember, telling my brother in Spanish, man, this place is great. And I remember a cleaning lady sticks her head out and says, what's so great about it? And I said, everything, So for me, everything was magical. There was a magic to it. And there was, the sky's the limit. You come here, and I just felt that. And sometimes it's how you look at things, glass that's half full or half empty. And the perspective that you put on it. What lens do you put on your camera, and what lens are you looking at life through as an adult or a kid? So the lens I was looking at it is I didn't know there were places where you could just, not that I have any hair, but where you can, at the time I did, where you can let your hair down and be relaxed. And so it was a huge contrast. And it's interesting because we landed there, and then my dad decided that we were going to drive to Salt Lake City. So we drove, because he wanted us to see the country and then have an opportunity as a dad. You're a dad, all dads want to give the kids, a pep talk. We're embarking on this journey, and you'll learn English and you'll contribute, and then just painting pictures of what could potentially be. And so, of course, I'm sitting in the back in the middle, listening to my dad and talking with my brother, and all the way to Salt Lake City. And what happened, that my dad and my grandfather were taken by shysters. So there was this American guy that was courting wealthy families. And my grandfather knew what was coming, because the socialist movement was like, and there was a lot of similarities. You have a Democratic Party, a Republican Party, very similar to the things that I see here, which we can talk about a little bit, but those divisions. And so this guy came, he was courting some wealthy Venezuelans, and he ripped off my dad. So my dad, not too long after we were in Utah, he has to literally come to grips with the fact that he's been ripped off, lost everything. So now we have nothing. So, and as a kid, as a teenager, I'm like, well, what does that mean? So imagine you talking to your 14-year-old and saying to them, we have nothing. But Dad, what does that mean? I mean, do I get to live in my room? Do I sleep in? I mean, it's like, how do you tell that to your son? Well, you're going to give him hope and you're going to do whatever you got to do. But you as an adult know that the realities, and then a kid has ideas. And so I didn't know the magnitude of the impact this was going to have on my life. And so, but are we going to be okay? And so my dad had to very quickly figure out what he was going to do. So we were latchkey kids for a little bit. He had some reserves, but not enough to last us. And so he had to figure out what he was going to do. So he left us. Um, and so I worked for some lady down the street. I was a grocery bagger, and then that lasted for a little while. And then my dad had made arrangements. For me, they fell apart. For my brother, he was with his girlfriend, which he ultimately married, and they've been married like 40 some years. And for me, that fell apart. So I was couch surfing, and then I was just, I had no money. So I just ate food from other kids' trays. Nobody really knew what was going on. And I was smart enough and knew well enough that I could not share this with anyone at my school, because then there were going to be consequences. I knew that much. And so I floated around and took showers at the school and stayed at friends' house. And then when there was no friend, then I, found places to sleep. And towards the end of that year, and fortunately for me, I had really good schooling in Venezuela. I had gone to some Catholic private schools, and so the only challenge that I had really was English. So I went to an immersion school before my dad lost all the money, and then I started the high school, and so there was a friend that I had met at the immersion school, and his uncle had fought in World War II. He was a military guy, and I used to go to their house, and he kind of figured something was up. Adult dads do. This kid's always wearing the same shirt. Sometimes it looked like he took a shower, sometimes it doesn't. He kind of looks a little on the homeless side, and so he was a kind man. He had his man cave, and he offered me so for the last 2-3 months of my high school, I stayed in it, and I connected it with my dad. My dad sent me $10, and then I reconnected with my mom. And again, there's no phones, there's no nothing. I mean, you communicate through letters. The letters took 3 weeks to get to Venezuela and 3 weeks to get back. So I probably had a couple letters. That was it. And I never really told my mom much about our situation, and my dad either. So with the money, I bought some shoes, and I got a couple of shirts, and I knew how to sew my own stuff. And then, now, how I saw all that, people ask me, well, geez, didn't you feel like you were not only missing out on things, but that you were like, there was something was wrong? And honestly, I saw it was an adventure, and I saw it through the eyes of this adventure where I was like on camping mode and trying to survive. And then at school, I would see if kids ate their fries or whatever they didn't eat, and I put it in a bag and I took it. And so it was survival, but I just knew that the best place here, the worst place here was better than any place down there. I mean, the toughest kids, I used to laugh in my head. I didn't say anything, but I'm like, this guy's tough. He has no idea what tough is. Or these guys are like, and yeah, so the trouble, nothing really faced me, because, I'm coming from a place where the contrast is so marked. And so that helped tremendously. Once I finished school, then reconnected with my dad, and then I ended up moving to California.
Wow. I want to go back to your mom, which, by the way, I think because you moved here at 15, correct?
Yeah.
So the first 15 years of your life seemed like just such a beautiful crash course and I use the word beautiful carefully, but a beautiful crash course in resilience.
Yeah.
Because you got to learn lessons early on that most of us will spend a lifetime and not be exposed to things like that, which, if you look at adversity, right? Or even us here in the United States, how we view like adversity, which certain problems come up and they're an absolute joke to a lot of people in a lot of countries, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, there's tremendous resilience that you displayed. And, you're just like, hey, my worst place here in the United States is better than the best place back where I came from.
Yep.
I want to go back to your mom though. And it really seems like she really led with this mentality of I'm I'm a resilient person, number one. So she emulated it sounds like. But number two, she wasn't really going to stand for her sons being anything less, which is, I go back to that story of her with, the gang member, and she's like, you get out of this car and fight this kid. Otherwise, you're gonna have to face me, which I think was quite fascinating. But what were some specific elements, specific lessons that you learned from your mom looking back on your relationship and
Well,
childhood?
it's interesting you point out the whole gang thing. So when the whole thing was over, they were getting ready to elect her as the leader of the gang. I mean, and to me, that was like, I was baffled. I remember thinking, how in the heck did my mom disarm all those kids? And now, after the fight was over, they were like, Senora this and Senora that, and they're patting her in the back. And I'm like, man, how did my mom just like control this entire group of people? And if she had aspiration to be a gang leader, she had her gang right then and there. And I ran to some of those kids later on, and they would like nod at me, or they they assume a protective mode. You know, I'm on a buzz or I'm some part of land downtown, and I knew they were members of that gang, and they just nodded at me like, "You're good," you know. So, and it was weird. My mom did that. She, it was it's interesting because in retrospect, as a kid, of course, we wanted human nature is to take the path of least resistance. And what you have to do is no pain, no gain. You can't get muscle unless you work out at the gym and break it down. We live in a world of polarities. You have to earn your place. I said this to Andy, in his show, earn your place. Whether whatever it is that you're doing, you have to earn your place and 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 just work for it. And that's really what she instilled in us. And as an adult, again, was she cuddly coming here? No. But do I love my mom? Absolutely. Do I have great talks with her? Yeah. And she's smart, brilliant. I can have these amazing discussions with her. I talked to her for an hour the other day. And she's really old, but her mind's intact. And then lots of wisdom. And her family immigrated too, from Europe, and there's all these stories, on her side and my side of the family too, that ultimately led me to the career that I have. And so a lot of these things were my dad was like Gandhi meets, Santa Claus. He was a philosopher type, calm guy, opposites attract kind of thing, and just really the word, and my mom was the warrior. She was the freaking warrior. And she focused on me because she wanted to bring that out more. She wasn't so much worried about my older brother because he had courage like nobody's business. They used to admire him. People were like, his presence, and he just is a great fighter. So for her, it was like, I got to get that out of you. You have it in you, and I have to bring it out. And there's no free lunch, son. There's no free this. So when I was as a teenager, and I had a lot of American friends, and they complain about this and complain about that. And I look at them, what are you complaining about? Are you kidding me? You can do anything you want. And so I'm doing the parents' bidding with kids that I was friends with because I'm the ones telling them. And lots of times it was taking as, okay, he's naive, or he just got off the boat, or, what are you going to do really when you grow up? And I said, well, I'm going to be president of my own company. I'm going to be a general. Maybe I'll be an FBI agent. And that kid laughed. No, really, what are you going to do? That's what I'm going to do. And so how are you going to do it? I don't know, but I'll find out. I don't know how that's going to happen. And so the importance is that the past is gone. The future has yet to be written, and all we have is the now. So whatever actions I take now, right this minute as I'm speaking to you, is what we have. So we take this and then we pivot from it and we create our future. And we use the past as a platform to build on. And so a lot of these things I passed on to my sons. But sometimes, as a parent, you don't have the impact, on your own kids that you would like. I had an impact on a lot of people's kids. And But my own sons, I did to a certain extent and we'll talk a little bit about my younger son. But I remember, like, for example, there was one family, and they had a son, and somehow it came to my attention. And at the time I was in the SWAT team, and I had finished a bunch of missions, and I had some time where I could spend with this kid. So he was like 15, 16 years old, and he had an attitude problem, this and that. So he came by my house several times, and I got to running with him and put him through challenge drills, and I was training him. And I figured, well, I'm just going to train him and get him excited of possibly doing something in the military or something. Fast forward, he actually became a Marine. And I think the last time I checked, and we lost contact with each other, he was like Marine Lieutenant Colonel. But he actually ended up going to OCS and all those different things. But he was a troubled kid. And along the way, he actually had sent me a little plaque because his dad was missing in action, basically, and his mom had raised him, and I made an impact on him. And so for me, that was huge because it was just one person that I impacted, and not hearing from him, and all of a sudden getting this little plaque, and I'm at the time already an FBI supervisor running squads, doing the operations that, organized crime, drugs, money laundering gangs, and then I get this package, and it was very nice, to think, okay, I had impacted this guy. Wow. I mean, he's like a freaking officer, and he's already been in combat and done all kinds of different things. So we have that impact. You do, I do, we all do. And in growing up, the people that impacted me, like that gentleman that took me in, who was a former military guy, and other military guys along the way, and other role models, not just my dad. My dad was the spiritual role model for me, but then there were the warrior role models that I looked up to, and to include my ancestors, and I'll just share with you my affinity for why I did what I did. In the South American Revolution was headed by Simon Bolivar. Simon Bolivar was like George Washington of South America. So here you had George Washington, Jefferson, Franklin, and all those people. In South America, you had Simon Bolivar. In the United States, you had the revolution against England, the King of England and all that, and, taxation without representation. In South America was the same thing, but against Spain, the King of Spain. So at the time, Napoleon was wreaking havoc. This is what Putin's doing now, what Hitler did, and then this is predating all that. So he displaced the King of Spain and puts his brother on the throne of Spain. So the South American colonies are rebelling. They're taking the opportunity to rebel against Spain, just like America did. And the second in command of all the armies of the South American Revolution was my great-great-great-grandfather. So the stories about him being Simon Bolivar's right-hand man were told to me, were told my grandfather, my dad. And so I had also that already wired in me, and also my great-great-great-grandmother, his wife, had been captured. They used her as a pawn, or tried to get him to turn himself in because they couldn't take him out. They could not capture this guy and take him out. So they shipped her to Spain. She had to appear before the king. And so the story, before she even gets there, there's some drama where, her ship gets captured by the pirates of the Caribbean. So they figure that she's a prisoner of the Spanish crown. And, she decides that she's still going to go to Spain, appears before the king. Apparently she doesn't curtsy. She doesn't bow and pay homage to the king. And, she could have gone to the equivalent of the Tower and they chopped her head off, but they didn't. She was young, beautiful, some British diplomat at the court, in those days, there's no TV. I mean, this is like, back in the days where they're just fanning themselves. And he's taken by her beauty. One thing leads to another. They let her walk around free in Spain. From there, he conspires, takes her to England, from England to Philadelphia. And then after the revolution was over, she goes back to Venezuela. All these stories were told to me. And so they were part of they were sort of subliminally or maybe subconsciously there for me, and in just finding courage and finding ways to pivot and finding the beauty in everything. There is no, and I told my sons this all the time, there is no bad experience. There's just experiences, and you just build on them. You build on the experience and you build on the experience. Anybody that's had a wonderful life has lived in a bubble. The best lives lived, the best stories, the best movies, the best everything. There's some drama behind it. And that's why we're drawn to that, because those are the things that bring out the best in all of us. And so we look at our experiences, and I looked at those experiences they had, and they were formative for me because they allow me to see, this, had they not done what they did, I wouldn't be talking to you. I wouldn't be here. But, I had a bizarre experience, and we continue to impact, our parents continue to impact us, and our ancestors do. I'm in the library at the university I'm at studying, and I'm going to quit that semester because I don't have any money. I mean, it's just like I can't pay for the next semester. And I'm sitting in this place. I've been sitting there for 2 years. I mean, and I'm just trying to think, okay, what am I going to do? And all of a sudden I decided to just reach out and grab a random book, all these tomes. I grabbed this tome, plopped it right on the desk, and I'm studying, open it to the exact page. And here's a portrait of my great, great, great grandfather. And here's Revolution, South American Revolution, blah, 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 in English. And I'm stunned. So I read it. I don't read all of it, but I read the narrative and explained in an adult way. Now here's an adult story of all the trials and tribulations that he had to go through, and asking Bolivar for more weapons, and the Spanish Armada is coming with thousands and thousands of soldiers that fought Napoleon. I mean, if they capture him, they're going to kill him, quarter him. I mean, these are like the signers of the Declaration of Independence here. That's what would have happened to Jefferson and Franklin and Washington. And so he overcomes all that. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, oh my God, this is a message from the other side. I don't want to get mystic here, but it is telling me, do not quit. Do not veer from the path, because it's like the butterfly effect. One little butterfly, and then you're off your path. So that right then and there, and then I ended up, there's no phones, there's no mobile phones. So I go to a payphone, call my ex-wife to pick me up. My wife at the time, and she comes, I tell her, park the car and come up because I got to show you something. So I walk her through what had just happened, and she's blown away. She's like, oh my gosh, okay, watch this. I pulled the book out and couldn't open it to the exact page, but I showed her, and I thought, this is a message from my ancestors saying, do not quit. You're not going to do that. You're going to find some way, and because this is nothing. And once I read again, I'm reminded that this is nothing. You cannot get desensitized to the things that get everybody turned, just the little silly things that you hear. Oh my gosh, didn't happen, that happened. But look at the people in Ukraine, or look at people, there's adversity everywhere. And so we have to be like, check ourselves and remind ourselves that we're in the greatest country in the world. You want change? Well, then vote. Want these things, but still a great country. And it's going to continue to be a great country because of people like you, and because dads everywhere, they're listening to your show. Why? Because you're imparting nuggets of wisdom that are going to make dads be better dads. And I, whatever I can do to further that cause, then so be it. I'm here.
Man, that is quite a story. I love how you just this situation where you just grab the book and then you open it up, and then there's this sign, right, of what you should do. And not only that, but an example of resilience and to keep going and you keep moving forward. I want to get to you being in the FBI. That was something that you really wanted to do. What was the path to get there?
So, obviously, when I came, I immigrated. And so I tell people, I immigrated to the greatest country. So if you come here, because this is a country of immigrants, everybody, I guarantee you, your ancestors came from somewhere else, your wives, your cousins, your neighbors, everybody. And so we come here, we integrate, we assimilate, and we become part of that fabric, that makes this country great. Part of what makes that American flag, amazing. And so for me, the path was, I want to contribute, I want to serve, I want to do something. But, there's a process. I had to jump all the hoops. There's the visas and this and that, and then get residency, and then becoming a U.S. citizen. That takes years. And in the process, you do whatever it is that you need to do. So fast forward, I wanted to do a lot of different things, but I wasn't able to because I didn't have the residency citizenship. But when I got my citizenship, it was one of the greatest days of my life, right up there with having my sons, because, here I'm becoming a U.S. citizen, and I remember shiny shoes and my suit, and I just couldn't wait. I studied, and I was so proud. I have a certificate. I'm a U.S. citizen. But I didn't want to just be, okay, so I got this. I wanted to feel I earned my place. I earned my citizenship. I want to be an American. I don't want to just say I'm an American. No, I'm an American. I've earned it. So what do I need to do? For me personally, was the way I contributed. It doesn't have to be a grandiose thing. You could work at whatever it is that you do and then do the best you can to the best of your ability. And you give it when people are not watching, that's when you do it. And you continue to do it and you give it your best. And so for me was like, I had this calling inside of me because for the reasons that I've shared with you, my background, my ancestors and all that. So military was calling to me. And then also I had come across, in the FBI being what the FBI was. And when I came into the FBI, it was in the mid 80s that I was looking into it. So, it's been 33 years since I was in the academy. I know I look younger than that, probably my genes, but the reality is it was a long time ago. And, the FBI had gone through all the ups and downs and the histories. And right now, it's a controversial situation. But I came at a time where there was a lot of crime. There was Miami Vice, and there was the Scarface had come out, and then Donnie Brasco, with what's his name, Johnny Depp. The movie hadn't come out yet, but the book was out, and so the only way for you to find out what was it like was really to watch movies, to go to the library and get books to read on. There wasn't social media. There was no way for you to really find out, and so that's what I did. But I had written down, once I got my citizenship, a list of things that I wanted to do. And I was going to serve in some capacity. So I put a list together of places that I was going to go to. So I was determined to walk into every branch of government and figure some way, hey, I've got a degree. I speak Spanish perfectly. I bring this to the table. This is my background. How can I serve? How can I? And on top of my list was the FBI. So I was in Las Vegas at the time, and I got a degree in business and accounting, and I had wanted entrepreneurial things called my attention, and so I walked into the FBI office and just cold turkey and met an agent, and he didn't look like James Bond, but he was pretty buffed, and he looked kind of like a pit bull. And so he talked to me a little bit, put me in a room, and then after that I figured I wasn't a threat and all that, and then I started the process. And talking to me. And so as much as he was recruiting me really, really hard, at the same time, he was always discouraging me because at the time they didn't need anybody. They had over 100,000 applications at any given time. And it's incredibly competitive. My goal was, I'm just going to apply everywhere. And whatever happens here, if it doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't matter. Nothing venture, nothing gain. So, and as I was walking out, he, pointed out not to go with this agency, alcohol, tobacco, firearms, you don't want to do that. There's, and then alcohol, everybody drinks. And, he tells me that. And I always stay with me because I laugh, and then DEA, you're going to do the same thing every single day. If you go with this other agency, but with us, you start at a much higher rate than everybody else. You'll end up working everything. And so that took that in, but the process took like 2+ years. And at some point, I was like, man, this is never going to happen. And of course, I have a family, I have a wife, I have a little son, and then I have to pay the bills and I have to support my family. And so I've got some interim jobs with the background that I had. And ultimately, I remember, and at that point, I already had a pretty good position with a company, and I had attained some, a level of success with it. And I thought, I don't know if I'm going to do this because, it's just been months and months and months. And the recruiter was like, just hang in there with me. Now you're almost there. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? So you're up against thousands of people. I said, how many people per class? Like 47. I'm like, in my head, there's no way I'm going to get in. So one thing leads to another. And he's telling me to hang in there. And then one last thing. So I have to speak to your boss. And I thought, well, wait a minute. So now you want to talk to him, but you're not going to guarantee me an appointment. But then now they're going to know I'm applying somewhere else. I'm going to put my job in jeopardy. And so I told him, let me think about it. And I slept on it, woke up the next day. I talked to my ex-wife at the time and, my dad and people. And for the most part, they didn't really think that they would come through, and they didn't want to be the ones that told me not to do and pursue it. So might as well let him do it and see if he if it happens. And if he doesn't, it wasn't us that told him not to do it. And so the next day I did. I called my boss, who's the regional president of the company, and I told him, I said, everything is going great, and but I'm going to be leaving. So he thought these other two companies were trying to recruit me, which indeed they were. And but I told him, I said, well, no, actually, I'm going to become an FBI agent. So he laughed, really hard. And he was like, from his gut, because he thought I was joking. And then I told him, no, that's what I'm going to do. And so you're going to carry a gun and do this and that. And I said, well, I guess that's what they do. But they're going to be calling you, so I just wanted to let you know. And so they did. And when I talked to the recruiter again, he's like, oh, okay, one more thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, one more thing. What else? He's like, okay, you got to take the physical test again. And I thought, okay, well, that's no problem. I'm in really good shape. I'll do it. But it was going to scheduled out a few weeks. And by the time the test came around, I was sick. I had the flu and I got from my son, and I was so sick. And so what could have been a nice, physical test turned into like a grueling, you know. And I thought, if I don't pass this or if I don't take it, there's no postponing and there's no nothing. I got to do it. And no matter what, or I won't get in. And they're not going to cut me any slack. This guy's not going to cut me slack. And this is at a time where, they weren't worried about, the things that people are worried about now. There are no like sensitivity things like, hey, get it done or don't get it done, or I'll see you when you're better dressed. So as sick as I was, I just popped a bunch of pills. I took, a drink that was popular at the time, Exceed or whatever. And I just got ready for it. And I was smiling and acting like I felt well, but I didn't. And after the whole thing was done, I felt like I ran 100 miles, and I'm just ready. I'm just standing there and he's so proud. And it felt like he talked to me for like a long time, but it was like literally seconds. And after he walked away, he had the appointment, gave it to me, gave me the tickets for me to fly and to Washington. And as he walked away, I didn't make it to my car. I just threw up all over and I just almost passed out. So that was really the beginning. And then once I got that, then I headed to Quantico. So I landed in Washington and I'm making my way to the FBI Academy. What was interesting to me that, again, it's a time where if you want to find out anything, you got to go to the library or, or just get books or get something that is just, you can't research things as quickly as you can now. So I find out, and I knew this from reading, the FBI Academy is smack in the middle of Quantico, Virginia, the Marine base. So it's the Marine base and smack in the middle. So at the time when I came in, the affinity with the Marines was like unbelievable. It was just a lot of the generation that was training me had come from Vietnam. A lot of these guys were former military, former Marines, former special forces, former and that seen combat and from different backgrounds, so it was interesting in when I got there because one of the incidents that had taken place in the United States in the mid-1980s was a famous Miami shootout where this bank robbers, rogue former military, took on a bunch of former military FBI agents. And these guys were robbing banks like the old-fashioned way, shooting the way up in and out. And they were killing people randomly. They'd get you shooting at a shooting range and shot a couple guys in the head and then took their car and robbing the armored cars. And so there was just, it all ended up in a just gigantic shootout, this battle that, just bullets flying every which way, FBI agents dead. And then the hero of the fight, he was an FBI agent, but he had been a former Marine. So he had got his arm blown off and he was like one of the last guys standing and got a shotgun and shooting it out with the bad guys who were actually getting into an FBI car. And he just walked up to him and then ended the battle right there, and shot them both point blank. But it was bloody. Well, fast forward, he was my sergeant major right in front of one. So on a report of the academy, he had been sent, obviously was recovering from his wounds and he's the guy the number one guy who's the staff counselor for our class. And then all the first sergeants were also former military guys. My PT guy was a captain who had fought in Vietnam, Marine captain. And so my class was comprised of a lot of former military guys and fighter pilots and attorneys and people who had never shot a gun to people who were like, special forces. And so I was pretty fortunate that I came at that time. The sensitivities were very similar to my mom's sensitivities. Okay. She had none. Okay. It's like, you're not bleeding, get up and go. Go get it yourself. Go do it yourself. And so that was what I encountered at the academy. And I felt that was tremendous because it's like, look, to be successful, you can't be expecting people to, apologize every time they say something to you, they step on your toes and this and that. That's not the real world. The real world is not, your mom is not there to cuddle you every single second. The real world is like, you got to get with it and find your place. This is what's made America great. This is the contrast. This is, you were asking earlier, well, the difference. And that stayed with me, Larry. That stayed with me and to this day, because, just, just to go to, Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter. It's just, I'm in the middle road, there's good on both sides. Let's just get with it, even to quote, John F. Kennedy, ask not what you can do, country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Ask what you can do. Earn your place. And that means just stop with the sensitivities and, there needs to be respect. There needs to be all these different things. You have to be respectful and stay in your lane and all that. But at the same time, it can be taken so way out where you have to bring it back in. And we need to bring it back in. And it's up to us. It's up to the parents that are listening to your podcast, because you have your kids, when they get to 13, 14, 15, by the time they're 15, then they're pretty much on their own. You've done your job. Really have done your job. Now it's just a few talks here and there, but they're going to be who they're going to be by the time they're 15. I was who I was going to be by the time I was 15, Larry. So my mom had done, and my dad, my dad was the spiritual influence in me. My mom was the warrior influence in me. And then that was it. I was already pretty much done. And so, I was on my own. I did not expect the things that happened to me to happen. And if I had to do it all over again, would I? Yes, I would, Larry, because those are the things that make you into who you are. If you fall down and something happens, then you just pick yourself back up. It's like that football game. It's not how you drop, it's how you pick up the ball and you keep on running. It's how do you pivot? How do you take a failure and turn it into a success? You hear all the stories about Edison and about all the incredibly successful people that have done something over and over again. And they don't see it as a failure. They see it as, okay, well, I couldn't do it. Then I'm going to turn around and do it another way. I applied all that and in my life, and I have nothing but respect and admiration for my mom. What she did, and I got hit. Corporal punishment was alive and well. I got hit with a belt, and my mom was not like some indiscriminate hitter. She was very focused, and I did get hit. We have funny stories, I wasn't, I was a troublemaker, but one of the stories is that my brother and I were talking about it, but we'd go to a party or something, and then my mom would call us over and she'd, come here, I want to talk to you. And so she'd come over and she hit my brother and me. It's like, what'd you hit us? Because you guys are going to do something at the party. So I'm going to hit you right now. So, we got hit in advance. But I give her credit for that. And to this day I do, and because she did the same thing for my sisters. My sisters were tough. My mom, I was already an FBI agent, okay? And my sister called me from Venezuela. And my mom had been at the bank. And so she was getting some money, not a lot of money, but she was getting cased by some robbers and on a motorcycle. They followed her home. And then when she gets out of the car, one of the guys jumps off the motorcycle and starts tugging my mom with the purse. And she fights the guy and she won't let go, and paid with a broken hand. My sister opens the door. My sister is a beautiful girl. And she opens the door, she jumps the guy, beats the crap out of the guy, gets him on the ground, knocks him and hits him. And The gun goes flying. The guy in the motorcycle takes off. Moral of the story, my mom, broken hand, my sister having to explain to everybody why she's beating the crap out of this guy because he's got a gun and he was robbing my mom. And it's funny because he didn't just stop with us; it was them, and so what do you do with all these different things? It was I tell people she was a drill sergeant from the time I woke up to the time I went to bed. How did I raise my kids? I didn't go in that direction. I was a little more moderate. In fact, I don't think I ever hit my kids, but I felt that my example would be enough. And so that as parents we have to take those lessons, and making things easier for our kids is just not it's not good for them, because giving them things, oh, I'm going to give you a car, bless your little heart, I'm going to give you this, and they're doing a lot of those things that we think that we didn't get, or giving them what we think sometimes is not a good thing. I think it's important to let them earn it, let them go through the little challenge, and we're there to buffer. We're there to make sure that they get the right information that's filtered through in a way that, but as parents, we look at our what happened to us, and lots of times we err, and so anyway.
Can I share a story with you?
Sure, absolutely, please.
Yeah. So I grew up, obviously not nearly as, survival mode as yourself, but it was definitely a very chaotic way to grow up. There were toxic, abusive men constantly in and out of me and my mom's life. And my mom really struggled with a lot of demons as well. And there was a lot of chaos, a lot of uncertainty. And the thing that I want from my boys, because we could very easily give them a very easy life, but I refuse to do that. So I'll give you two examples. One being the school that my kids go to. This blows my mind. And where I went to school growing up, if you didn't do an assignment, you got a 0. There was no leeway. You got a 0, black and white. I don't know what it is with the school system that my kids are in, but I can go on their dashboard to see what assignments have been turned in and which ones are missing. We have a rule in this house. There are no missing assignments. Your assignment is the same as your word. Therefore, if it's due on Friday, that's your word, that's your homework, you turn it in. Yeah. These teachers, it happens all the time. I have yet to see a teacher be like, no, it's due Friday and you have a 0. If it comes due on Friday and a student doesn't have it done, and my kids have been in this situation, they're like, oh, that's okay. Just go ahead and turn it in on Monday or Tuesday. And I'm like, and I've told my boys, so like when I go on their dashboard, I'm like, hey man, there's 2 missing assignments here. Yeah. Well, the teacher told me to go ahead and just turn it in on Monday. I was like, yeah, but not under this roof. That's not how we operate. Your assignment, I don't care what your teacher says. In this house, your assignment is your word. It's no different than if your boss asked you for a report. If it's due on Friday, he's not going to give you till Monday. If you own your own business and you have a deliverable to a customer, you told him it's going to be Friday, it's Friday. Otherwise, that customer is going to fire you. So in this house, there are consequences. They think we're crazy. Like my boys think, they're like, you're the only parent that does it. I'm like, good. I'm glad to hear that. I'm going to keep doing it. I was like, because if I go in your dashboard and I see a missing assignment, there will be consequences. Yeah. And I've laid out those consequences. One other example was one of my boys, and they both listen to the podcast. I'm not going to out them for privacy, but one of them just cut the grass. They flip-flop between the two of them cutting the grass. And I do pay them for that. And my one son cut the grass, and the deal is these are the rules. You cut the grass by Tuesday every week. Be vigilant about the weather, whether you need to do it Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, it doesn't matter, but be vigilant about the weather. If it's going to rain Sunday, you cut it Saturday, right? Because the yard waste comes on Tuesday, which they're required to bag the front yard. The backyard, not so much. It's fine. We play back there, but the front yard, they bag it. So my one son cut the grass. This was just last week. He had the bag on, and I was kind of watching him. He cut the entire yard and didn't empty the bag. And I was like, what is going on? And I said, hey man, I go, you might want to empty that bag. I was like, it's got to be full at this point. And he opens it up, and the thing that blocks the grass from coming in was in there because the last person who did it put that in there because they had probably done the back. And he's like, oh, he's like, I guess it didn't fill up and I guess it didn't bag. And I was like, okay. And I just made a note of it. He comes in, he's like, I'm all done. I was like, okay, cool. He's like, well, do I get paid? I was like, no. He's like, what? And I was like, no, you don't get paid. I was like, why? And he goes, I go, because you didn't do the job the way it was supposed to be done. Therefore, you don't get paid. And I said, here's what I will do though. I was like, if you were my employee, if I hired some random kid to do my lawn, you'd be fired. I was like, if you come knocking on my door and you didn't fulfill expectations and you expect to be paid, you'd probably be fired. I
Yeah.
was like, I'm not going to do that. I will do this though. I was like, if you get it done by tomorrow, because tomorrow's Tuesday and you have it out in time, I'll give you half. It's up to you. I was like, I can give you half or you can walk away with nothing. What's it going to be? And man, he kind of pitched a fit and he was like, God, he's like, you're so strict sometimes. And I'm like, listen, man, make these mistakes now. I was like, because the real world there ain't going to be a tomorrow. I was like, I'll give you an opportunity because I know it was actually a mistake. I was like, but not doing it. And my kids, like, they think we're crazy compared to, other parents. Even the parameters we put around their phones and screen time and apps and that kind of thing. Like their friends will watch freaking TikTok for 5, 6, 7 hours a day. My kids get 1 hour of screen time on their phone a day and then everything shuts off. They think we're crazy. I'm like, listen, man, I don't care what other parents do. And I also love to do another thing called manufacture adversity, where I'll put my kids through challenging things physically, mentally, and emotionally.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go into that for the sake of time, but I think it's so important. My last question is this to you. I got to be really honest with you, Anthony. I really feel that the parents out there, we're not dealing with parents that are helicopter parents. We deal with parents that are bulldozer parents, right? That go in and then they want to rescue all their kids with golden parachutes. Now, listen, here's what I'll say about that approach. I think it comes from a heartfelt place where probably a lot of men and women in our generation, you and I, we probably grew up in these maybe tougher situations. So we want to give everything on a silver platter because we know how painful it was for us growing up. But I think that I agree with you. It's a disservice. I want to know, what is your best advice for raising resilient kids? Because I think we're raising a huge generation of fluffy kids.
Yeah.
Because we have fluffy parents that give them everything. So what is your best advice to teach resilience and mental toughness?
You said it. I mean, I think that it's much more difficult now. Parents really have a difficult time because they're just surrounded with so much social media. And like you said, your kids are always going to use examples of their friends and this and that. But I think the basics are it's connecting with nature and finding ways to take him out of the the electronic world and then going into nature and finding ways, especially here in America, to have them do things for themselves, or they're not dependent on some technology and or doing things for themselves. Some kids will, hey mom, can you get me some water? I mean, are you kidding me? Go get it yourself. The simple things, haven't earned things, like you did with your sons, and they may say something now, but later on they will appreciate it. I think that it's really important to try to be a filter. It's difficult because I see, and again, I came here in the 70s. I mean, I'm older than I look. I'm 60 years old. So my sons are grown. I've got a 35-year-old and a 31-year-old. But when they were growing up and the phones were out, there's still social media. There were a lot of different things that you still have now, but they're on hyper mode. And it's being that filter, connecting with them, finding ways to interact with them, and not letting that go by. And I failed a lot of it because of my job and because and I feel like I could have done more things. And my son, youngest, kind of fell through the cracks a little bit, and he did, and I had to jump in and rescue him and send him away because I knew I didn't have the tools. And then also it comes down to knowing when you can do that yourself and when you cannot do that yourself. And I've had other parents tell me, hey, their son got into drugs. We're going to put him in this and that. And I said, look, and they've asked me, how did you do it? Because I've had friends where their sons fell through the cracks, but they still wouldn't take the steps that were really harsh, meaning, send them away if you can, completely immerse them in another environment because they wouldn't do it. And they couldn't do it because their hearts were just, bleeding. Oh my God, my son, I don't know if they're going to be able to withstand that. And I've had friends say that. And literally the same age as my son, fast forward, their kids, like some of them are just not around anymore with us because they continued on. And I had to do that with my son and made some really difficult decisions and sent him away, but there's just no way. And it saved his life. And it saved him because it unplugged him completely from the entire world. And was it harsh? I researched the school. I did everything a parent can do. And still it breaks your heart because it's your little baby, 3 years old, 4 years old, and you're just bonded to this. But they're not. They're teenagers and they have to. So I was speaking from that perspective. I have one that I had no issues with. And then my second, it was just everything that could go wrong went wrong. And so I knew I didn't have the tools at that point. I'm divorced. I have to make some really harsh decisions, and I did. And the hard decision was to send him away. And in sending him away meant complete, unplugging. And guess what? He draws from it, has drawn from the experience, and made him a stronger person. It was literally like going to a boot camp. And he tells me all the time, he actually bonded with some of the kids and stays friends with them. He graduated from college. He went on to, he did internship with NASA. I mean, the guy is like a rock star. He's absolutely, completely done so many different things. But, had I not done that, Larry, I think that he wouldn't have gotten there. And he and I have great friends now. We've discussed it. We've talked about it. And so sometimes as parents, you have to make hard decisions. And that's a really harsh decision because it came at a point where there was no other, I wasn't there. Whatever it is that I did, it didn't work. And it got to a point it was completely out of control. And then they had to make a decision that was very, very definitively harsh. Now, if you have an opportunity to connect with your kids and you're not there yet, then just taking away something or making your son mow the lawn again, like you said, or doing little things that may seem harsh are not. They're really not. You're giving them tools to be able to reflect on themselves, to value themselves. You got to give kids wins, but you can't make them win at everything. You can't give trophies out for every single thing. You have to give them an opportunity to earn that. And when they earn it, they actually feel really good about themselves. Think about you. Think about me. Think about adults. I mean, if you don't run the 100-mile race and somebody gives you a trophy, you don't really feel like you earned it.
Right.
You want to feel that you earned your place and nobody gave it to you. So if you have children, give them opportunities to do that. And, give them opportunities to connect with wilderness, camping activities, and in all of that, we live in a world where everything is a rite of passage. Okay. And, if you go to an academy, you got to jump a bunch of hoops before they give you your credentials. That's a rite of passage. You go to college, it's a rite of passage. Nobody's going to give you a degree. And if they do, and you haven't really earned it, then it's just a piece of paper that means nothing. So give your kids opportunities to win, but make them work for it.
Yeah.
And then make them feel like, wow, and then look for 1,000 different ways to tell them that how amazing, look for opportunities to praise them. It's like a manager in a corporation. If you're continually like, find ways and find the wins. They do things. Pay attention to those. We live in a society that focuses on the negative. I mean, you go through your grocery store and it's a tabloids. And what do they have? Bad information. It's bad news that tracks. You're not talking about some miracle that happened. Nobody wants to hear that. They want to watch zombie movies and bad stuff. So find good things, in them. Hey, you know what? I noticed that you did this the other day. and start paying attention to the good things and say, hey, you know what? Wow, I really love that. And one, you're letting them know that you're paying attention. Two, they're like, really? Yeah, I thought that you did really well at that. And I just wanted to just mention it to you. And so that little tiny bit stays with them. And it sounds to me like you're doing a great job with your kids. And um, it's it's really critical, especially the generations to come, because those are your kids and their kids are America. You want to know what America is going to be all? That's it. It's them. It's happening now.
I'm so glad you said that. I didn't know you were going to say that because that has been a big, big message. Because I want to close with this that we've been talking about a lot on this podcast and in the community, that a lot of men think that, so for instance, our personal growth, right, as parents, as as fathers, as husbands, as men, that our personal development, our personal growth starts and stops with us. And that's absolutely insane to me at this point, because it doesn't stop with us. The things that we do and the things that we don't do will impact our kids and will impact our grandkids.
Yes.
So when a man looks at himself in the mirror and he's like, I'm just not worth the time. I'm just too busy, or I just have that, or, I shouldn't even do that thing, or whatever that thing is, or whatever. I should just quit this or whatever, or just numb myself with booze and,
Yeah.
junk food and just let myself go. Cause that's what dads do, man. That's not what dads do.
Yeah.
You are the leader. The things that you do, you are a walking, talking, moving the movie that your kids are watching every single day, and they're learning and they're picking up. Every good lesson is caught, not taught. And if they see us doing these things, that's going to impact them. And then it's going to impact our grandkids. And I say this all the time, the work that we do as men, husbands, and fathers is generational impact.
Yeah.
Your upbringing, right, impacted your sons, and
Yep.
your sons will also, your grandson and daughters will also be impacted by the resilience your mom taught you, which I
Yeah.
think is incredible, right? So we need to make sure that sinks in.
Yeah, and just being role models
Yeah.
also for your kids and other people's kids. There are a lot of single parents out there, and sometimes you have more of an impact on somebody else's sons,
My God, yeah.
and then they have more of an impact on your sons, because then you
Yeah.
got to get them to hey, can you tell my son this?
Yeah.
They're going to listen to you, or can you? And so you're a walking example everywhere you go, and you may or may not know that you're a role model for that kid.
Yep.
They're looking up to you, and then they'll tell you 20 years later, hey, you know what? You really impacted me. You were the dad I never had, but I really enjoyed coming over to your house, and the things that you taught your kids. We have that kind of an impact. It's just like the butterfly effect. And so doing that, it's really important, because, and then one last thing that I'll say, uh, live in the now. The yesterday is gone. A lot of people either live yesterday or they live like trying to plan the future. The future is now. You have nothing but this moment right now. And that moment could be, take the time, 5 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and then be in your kids' world, engage with them. And especially when they're little, by the time they get 13, 14, 15, they're like, don't hug me, don't touch me. I don't, drop me off at school here. Don't look at me. But you can still have whatever you've done up to that point, you can impact them. And then from there on, it's really, you are an example to them, and they're watching every single thing you're doing.
Oh yeah.
And it's going to impact them either right then and there or in the future.
Wholeheartedly agree with you, my friend. Be here now. I actually wrote that on the bottom of my shoes. Be here. I got that from the podcast guest before you, Brian Boggart. He writes on the tongue of his shoes, be here.
Be here.
And I think that's an amazing lesson and a great place to end. I want to make sure, Anthony, that the men in the audience, if they want to connect with you and your resources, obviously buy your book. We want to make sure that they can find the easiest places to do that.
They can go on anthonyarismendi.com. Also on Instagram, anthony.arismendi. Yeah, so that's, and in Amazon, and the book's called Outsider Agent. And I'll have my admin send you an email, and I think they may have. for your show notes, but I'm not sure if you have them, but I'll make sure you do get that.
We'll get everything in there. Not to worry, guys. You won't have to look far for this particular podcast. All you have to do is head on over to thedadedge.com/391 for this show. Again, thedadedge.com/391. Anthony, this was such a pleasure. This was so good. Hearing about your childhood, hearing about the resilient lessons that your mom taught you, your journey here into the United States, along with your journey becoming an FBI agent, all the things that you had to go through. And raising good young men. And some of the things were fantastic, and some of the pathways weren't pretty, but the outcome has been really, really great. And I just appreciate you coming on and sharing these personal sides of you, my man.
Thank you, Larry. Appreciate it. Thank you for the time and enjoyed it. And sure we'll run into each other somewhere.
Can't wait, man. I can't wait. Like I said, gentlemen, head on over to thedadedge.com/391 for this show and go out and live legendary. Take care.